how does credit card processing work? You ever wondered how does credit card processing work? Whether you're a business owner or you're a merchant sales rep or even a banker or a CPA or just somebody that's curious about how the world works. Payment processing, credit card processing as a whole, how the pricing works, how the technology works, all of those things, it's complicated by design. Right? It was created by credit card companies and things are moving around. There's middlemen involved and stuff like that. And so a lot of people just want to know, how does credit card processing work? And so we're going to cover that in a brief synopsis today. We're not going to spend a bunch of time on it, but I want to make sure that you have the tools that you need as a rep to go out and sell it. Or if you're a business owner, that you have the tools that you need in order to understand whether or not what's being told to you is true, and how do you verify all that kind of stuff. So let's start by talking about who are the players involved. So let's just draw, for example, this will be your business, okay? And you're open for business. There's your little door right there. And inside your business, you have a credit card machine, right? And it has a little receipt tape. That's the receipt tape thing that comes out right there. You may or may not be able to see that very well, but this is the merchant, right? So this is the merchant. That's what I call it, at least. We call it the merchant. It could just be the business. Now, we're representing this as a business right now, but ultimately this could be an e-commerce store. It could be a plumbing company and somebody's calling in the card numbers from the field to them. It could be a call center where people are calling in and ordering a product and it's being shipped to them. It doesn't matter what the front end payment processing looks like, whether it's software or a credit card machine or a POS system or whatever. All that matters is that this is where the card information meets the system. In this case, we're using a retail store just as our little example. And so the consumer, the card holder, walks in, they pay with their card, and from there, the transaction gets sent off. And so from where does it get sent off to? Well, the first place it gets sent off to is a place we're going to call the processor, okay? And we're going to represent the processor as like a building that is a tall building with a bunch of computers inside, a data center where it processes data. One of the old school payment processors that got bought by another big company was First Data. The reason they say data is because the processors are really just processing data information. That's their job. So it goes to the processor, and the processor is going to then decide, look at the information that's coming in. What bank is this coming from? Or what card brand is this coming from? It's coming from Visa, MasterCard, what bank? There's 4 major card brands that are domestic card brands in the United States: Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express. On top of that, you still have like the old school Diners Club and a few others. Then you have international cards like Union Pay, JCB, and a few others that all can still be processed. Even though this is a domestic processor, international cards can obviously still be processed. It's still just data. But then you also have 15 debit networks domestically in the U.S., give or take. So depending on what the brand of the card is and what the best route for that card is, and there's a couple different ways to determine what the best route is, whether it be pricing or efficiency, which we're not going to get into that today, but you come over from the merchant business to the processor. The processor then is saying, hey, let's send this over to the card brand. All right? Is the card brand. We're about a little chip card, and we're going to put a V there, but this could be, we're going to put the brand, okay? But this could be, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or American Express, all right? Amex. So from the merchant walks in, runs the card. We need to know, can we get an authorization for this payment, sort of $100 payment? It goes to the processor. From the processor, it goes to the card brand. From the card brand, it comes to the issuer. So this is the bank. So let's make a bank with a drive-through, right? With the lines for the drive-through. But this bank is also called an issuer. The reason it's called an issuer is because this is the bank that issued the card to the card holder that came into the merchant. So if it's a Capital One card, a Bank of America card, American Express, whoever the bank is, it's going to go through this process of to the processor, to the card brand, to the bank, and it's going to ask the bank, it's going to ask the issuer for an authorization number. And the authorization number is going to be associated with some information. What's the dollar amount that we're authorizing? And is that funds there? Are we going to give an approval authorization, or are we going to give a declined response? And so we're waiting on a response from the bank. It goes out, and then almost in like real time, split second, the bank sends it back to the card brand. The card brand sends it back to the processor sends it back to the credit card machine at this retail store that we're talking about in our example, and bring, you get an approval or a decline. Now, a decline is a valid response. It just means that the bank said, no, we're not going to give you that money. But most of the time, obviously, these transactions are approved. You get the approval, and then what ends up happening is the processor, holds all of that for the day, you batch out, and then at night, the merchant gets the processing that comes back to their bank account, right? And so somewhere in here with the processor is a what we call another bank, which we're going to call the acquirer. All right, and the acquirer is the bank, acquirer bank, that actually funds the merchant at the end of the night. It also is the bank that is on the hook for chargebacks in case they can't pull that money out of the merchant's account, and so on and so forth. And so most of the time, the processor's underwriting guidelines are based on the underwriting guidelines of the acquiring bank. This is also why you'll hear things like high risk, low risk, and stuff like that. So one important thing for you to understand why I went through this whole process is that everybody in this scenario gets paid. And so as a business owner, as a merchant sales rep, who's working, in affiliation with a processor, it's good to note that the processor gets paid for their trouble, the card brand gets paid for their trouble, and the bank, the issuer, gets paid for their trouble. But just so everybody knows, the big money goes to the issuer, the bank that issued the card. Most of the money in a payment processing transaction goes back to the bank issuer, the issuing bank, through what we call interchange. And again, we can get through pricing and things like that at some point. But the important thing, again, here for you to note is that if you had a bill of $2,000, the majority share of that goes back to the bank, because that's really what the processor's job is. The processor funds the merchant, but it also collects from the merchant the fees that go back to the bank. Now, the card brands, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, they make less per transaction, but they make money from the processor, they make money from the issuing bank, and they make money from the merchant in the way of dues and assessments. So the card brands just have a higher volume way of making those, versus like every different bank issues cards, and then on those transactions on those cards, they're able to get a portion or get the interchange fee, and that's how they make their money. And so knowing how this environment works helps understand why payment processing has a cost. So let's examine just one more thing. I want to just describe to you very quickly, because we mentioned the banks and what is interchange, and we'll make probably a separate video on what is interchange, but I want to describe it to you very quickly because it helps you understand how the pieces of the puzzle work. So the issuing bank, right? The issuer issues a card, right? So they issue a card. Okay. And so in order to issue that card, they had to partner with the brand, okay? And so in our example, we'll say that the issuer here will be Capital One. This is just a fake example, so maybe we don't use Capital One, maybe we use Capital Bank, all right? All right, and then the brand we'll say is Visa, and again, this is just an example, so I'm just need something that you'll understand from a basic standpoint. And so the issuing bank, Capital Bank, decides they want to go and give away or issue cards to their cardholders, and they want it to be a rewards card that's going to give people miles or hotel points or rewards or something like that for airlines or vacations or whatever. And so they get together here and they decide on an interchange category, and the fee that they come up with is called interchange. And interchange is the predominant fee. So in this case, we'll say that interchange is 2%, 2.0%. All right. And then the processor then over here, who processes the transaction, look at that, processor. And we'll call them, data company. All right. The processor that processes this transaction is going to add on to that some fee. But the fee that they charge on top of that is usually less than whatever the interchange is, because they're simply just facilitating the collection of these fees from the merchant on behalf of the issuer, on behalf of the card brand, and on behalf of the acquiring bank. And so that's a basic synopsis of how the environment of credit card processing works. Obviously, there's more to it, but this is a good start to try to understand how you can understand the process, so that when you're going at it, you understand that all of these people have to get paid. And there is a cost associated with it. If you want to accept a card, then there's going to be a cost, right? That interchange cost before it ever even makes it to the processor. And then the processor is the one where you have the ability to negotiate rates and fees, and they'll have their own, way of pricing things based on volume and all of that, so to speak. So I hope this helps. If you guys want more education like this, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with somebody that you know, so that we can keep making stuff like this. See you guys on the next one.